All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Friday Chalk Talk. Today is part 5 of a recurring series that we call Interviews with Sages, Magi, and Madmen, where we've got the pleasure of bringing in well-seasoned experts that have agreed to share some of their inspiration and their career wisdom with us. And today I have the pleasure of introducing our guest, Dr. Wendy Peltier. Wendy received her medical training at Rush Medical College and completed her neurology residency and a neuromuscular fellowship at the University of Michigan. And now she's been a faculty member at the Medical College of Wisconsin since 1996. She served as the palliative care section head for 8 years and helped in launching a floating hospice service at Froedtert Hospital. And more recently, she served on the faculty pillar of the MCW Kern Institute, which is striving to transform medical education through focusing on caring and character. And so, Wendy, thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
Absolutely.
Our format for today is going to be 2 parts. So Wendy and I have agreed on a handful of questions that we're going to discuss, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end, open for anyone if there are questions or comments. So let's start at the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey to the field of palliative care and what you're doing with it now?
Absolutely. And I'm happy to say that the journey hasn't reached its destination. So one of the great things about medicine, right, as a career is that we're always a work in progress. And certainly I've stayed in academic medicine due to my joy of learning and watching things evolve. So back in the day when I was choosing my residency pathway, a lot of my attendings and fellow students tried to talk me out of doing neurology, right? Like, why could you do neurology? So many bad diseases. And I was fascinated with the mind and the brain. And, really, when I look back, one of my mentors told me then, you need to pick a career of something you want to spend the rest of your life learning about. And if I look at what happened in the field of neurology since I was in training, it's really remarkable. Acute stroke therapy, therapies for MS, stimulators for everything. And what happened is I became very passionate about end of life care in my clinical work as a neuromuscular neurologist. So I was taking care of patients with ALS, I was running a muscular dystrophy clinic. I was always very family centered in my approach since so many of my young adults or older folks with muscular dystrophies had physical disability and needed care networks. So I was very lucky to get a MCW Faculty Vitality Award in 2012, which let me immerse myself in palliative care, learn more about it, and grandfather into the palliative medicine boards. And so that's how it all happened. I guess the rest is history, and I feel like my work in palliative care is ongoing. I really consider it a gift in my profession and in my personal life to do this work. I feel like I've become a better human, wife, parent since doing palliative care.
Wonderful. You mentioned a mentor. I'm sure you've had a few along the way. Can you tell us a little bit about a mentor you've had and why that person was so particularly valuable?
Yeah, I do have to say that everyone that I worked with on the MCW palliative care team in the early days were incredible mentors. Sean Marks, John Gooley, Joe Weiss, our nurse practitioners at the time. Sandy Muchko was one of them. But the person that I really identify as someone who encouraged me to take the leap from neurology to palliative care was Glenn Regali. And Glenn Regali is just a kindred spirit. He was a mid-career person in his transition from critical care to hospice work. And I spent my Vitality Award I had time at Zilber throughout that whole period. And I attended the IDT rounds there. I rounded with Glenn. I did home visits with the Aurora nurses. And it was really transformative for me. And I have kept in touch with Glenn over the years, and I really feel like Glenn saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and was really able to encourage me that I was capable of making a switch and doing this work. And he always reminded me of the joy that comes from doing this work, particularly the hospice work. And Glenn has such an amazing legacy there at Silver, and I know he's even in his retirement, he is volunteering there. So I feel very lucky that my path crossed with his.
I've never run into Glenn, but his legacy certainly still lives on. I've heard plenty of stories.
Oh yeah.
Now there are new clinicians, new chaplains, new social workers, lots of new people moving into this field. Can you share maybe a piece of advice for those of us that are early into our careers? And can you also share a piece of advice that you would like to have shared with a younger version of yourself?
Sure, I have two really quick things. One, my mentor at the University of Michigan, Eva Feldman, who was a triple threat, a researcher, a clinician, and an educator. She always said, begin with the end in mind. And I think that's one thing that's really tricky when you're transitioning into a new area and there's so many things that you're interested in. You know, you kind of want to look ahead that 5-year plan and say, you know, where do you want to end up with this? What do you want this to look like? And the other thing is, you know, you got to know how to say no. And that took me a really, really, really long time. So I love neurology so much. I didn't feel like I was running away from neurology or giving up neurology. I felt like I was taking on palliative care. And so when I look back at my younger self, and I can remember my boss at the time, Mary Horowitz, she just would always kind of just kindly say, you know, you don't have to do neurology practice anymore. Kind of nudge, nudge. I think you know, if you spread yourself too thin, you're not going to be able to get that reward and that momentum that you need to stay current in an area. So there is now an area of neuropalliative care, and this group has its own society, and there is the first neuropalliative care resident fellowship, I believe, has come into play. But you know, when I made this transition, that hadn't really been formalized. So so for me, I think trying not to take on too much and staying focused and making work-life balance important could have been done better at times.
As a follow-up, can I put you on the spot and ask you, why do you think it's so hard for us to say no? And maybe it's different for
Wow.
different people.
Well, I mean, I think it's part of it is that when something really interests you and you're really passionate about something, you don't want to miss an opportunity, right? To grow or develop. Like again, I didn't even apply for the Faculty Vitality Award until I had a nudge and I had a push from my chairman at the time to consider it. So there's that issue of am I missing an opportunity,
Mm,
right? That you have to balance with that same issue of disappointing someone if you really don't think you can take it on.
mm,
And I guess what I learned through many, many years is that these have to be conversations. And sometimes there's a way to have a conversation. I think there's a little phrase for this, like no, but,
uh,
or no, and,
mm,
where you can still help that person that's making a request of you um, without necessarily feeling like you're skirting work or responsibility.
sure. I have to imagine that in order to say no to, you have to know who you are and what's important to you and what it is you're trying to chase, like you talked about with the 5-year plan. If you don't know what you're trying to go after, you're just going to take on a little bit of everything and you'll be scattered.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Can we ask you to share something with us that you've read and share a little bit about why it's so meaningful to you?
Yeah, that was an easy one for me. So MCW has a common read program now, which started a few years ago before the pandemic. And the first book that was chosen for the common read was a book called In Shock by Dr. Rana Oddish.
Mm,
I don't know if you've read it, but she is a critical care doctor at Henry Ford who had a critical illness herself. And oh my gosh, having met her personally, she is someone that has the most amazing way with words.
mm,
And her story is so gripping to read as a book. And then having met her through the Common Read program, we bring the author to campus and heard her story and how her life journey in medicine changed after going through her own illness experience, and then now how that has evolved to a whole new world for her, um, is very, very inspiring. I think most of us who participated in the Common Read that year follow her on Twitter, and this was before the pandemic, and now she's back at work as a critical care doctor. So she's someone to follow and learn about.
wonderful. What about the future? Can you tell us a little bit about where you see the future of palliative care going, or maybe perhaps where you wish it would go?
Sure. And this is the fun thing about what I carry forward from my days as a student and a resident
Mm,
from my mentors, right? Is that whole idea that medicine and science is evolving. We're all a work in progress. And, look at the field of palliative medicine and all the things that are happening. It's very exciting. And I have to say, for the first time at MCW, we have a surgeon in our group, a surgeon and an anesthesiologist. Leanne Lau and Laura India were recruited to our program. And I think it's this diversity in the ability to certify in palliative medicine and then those perspectives that we take on in our work in trying to get earlier palliative care and trying to promote palliative care in other disciplines. I mean, just the thought that in 2012 I was one of just a handful of neurologists that were palliative certified, and now there's an international neuropalliative care society. Um, that kind of thing is really, really exciting to me. The other two pieces, though, that I thought about when I looked at these questions is through our experience with the floating hospice service at Prater, which certainly had its challenges. One of my wishes for the future of palliative medicine is that we can destigmatize hospice care and get easier access. I sort of dream about a time when hospice is not so regulated. Wouldn't that be amazing?
yeah.
And then the other piece that we're working on a lot at MCW is this idea of how can all students and residents have better foundations in palliative medicine and communication, regardless of what their specialty choice is. And I think there's progress. I think progress has been made. Um, but I really would like to see a day when our future physicians just had better skills in this area.
Mm, yeah. My last question for you before we open it up for group discussion is, can you share something about an aspect of life outside of the field of palliative care that, even though that maybe isn't directly related to medicine, still helps to make someone a better palliative care clinician?
Sure. And I've had quite a journey around this myself in terms of being a very busy clinician and mom and
Mm,
doing work in palliative care, particularly at Freighter, where we do tend to see a lot of young people, a lot of catastrophic loss. I think that I really took those experiences as a way to look at my own life and realize how short life really is and what's most important. I think that for many of us too, living through a pandemic has been part of that. And so I committed to yoga practice. Actually, I went to my first yoga class kicking and screaming. So in my younger years, I was very much I've got to go for a run. I've got to do this. was very active, and I had this bias that, yoga was sitting in a room, humming to yourself. And so I had no idea about the benefits of it. And I have to say, I'm so grateful that I have that now, particularly during the pandemic, because it's been very centering. And then I have tried so hard to be in the moment with things, whether that's paying attention to the beauty of my neighborhood on a dog walk. You and I were chatting about the cooking and family things that we do on Sundays. And usually there's that constant voice in your head. I've got to check emails. I should be doing this. The laundry has stacked up. And doing Palliative Care has just given me this amazing privilege to say, no, I don't care. I'm going to do this. And that's the piece that I think led to me feeling like I'm a better friend, mother, wife, colleague than I was before.
Beautiful. Thank you, Wendy. We'll open it up. If anybody has a comment, a question, and anything.
Hi, Wendy, it's Sandy. Hi. Thanks for sharing your story. I'm glad to have been part of your journey. I'm going to be sharing my story in June, so I'm not going to share it now, but I just want to say thank you. It's been wonderful getting to know some of that insight. I don't think I knew a lot about that background and that real transition that you made over to palliative care. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see you.
Thanks.
That's the darn thing about the pandemic. We don't have our fellowship that we usually enjoy. So thanks for popping on.
Sure.
We have nothing else, then Wendy, I'm going to share a story about you, and then we'll call it a day.
That wasn't in your email.
No, it wasn't. So this is a story about Wendy and how gracious and wonderful that she is. So when I was a fellow at the University of Iowa and looking for a job back here in Wisconsin some years ago, I interviewed at the Medical College of Wisconsin, and I had to give a lecture, and it was the very first time I was ever giving this lecture. And I know that I have two different cadences for speech. I have this cadence, which is fairly slow and calm, and I have my nervous cadence, which is about 50% faster. And I was very nervous. First time giving this presentation, and this 45-minute talk ended up going like 25 minutes, and it was so short. And Wendy was so fabulous, and she didn't skip a beat and came up with some questions to ask, and we ended up talking for the last 25 minutes, and I am forever grateful for that, Wendy.
Oh, thank you for sharing. It's sweet that you remember that. Yeah.
No, I have a Wendy story too, so I won't go into my background too much, but as Wendy mentioned, I came from surgery, and so I came from private practice general surgery to fellowship, and private practice general surgery for 13 years to fellowship. And so after my first week as a fellow, I was questioning my sanity as to why I made this decision. And Wendy was my attending my second week. And after we got the day rolling, she kind of pulled me aside at, 10:45 on that Monday morning. So kind of right after we'd gotten everything assigned, and just said, "How are you doing?" and of course, your answer always is fine, just fine, right? Fine. Everything is fine. In meantime, in the back of my brain, I'm thinking, I've lost my mind. What was I thinking? I had a wonderful surgery practice. I'm, don't know where anything is in this building. I don't know how anything works. I don't know who anyone is. There's all this weirdness. And she said, I found it really, and I don't remember your exact words, Wendy, so I'm just summarizing my brain, but I found it a struggle to go from busy private practice type of life as a specialist to this when I transitioned. And of course, at that point, then I went, yeah. And she said, "Don't worry, it will be okay." And it was just so nice to have the similar reflection back from her that there was that struggle, and just the acknowledgement that that specific part of the transition was going to be a challenge and had nothing to do with whether or not I could be a palliative care doctor or anything like that. Just the fact that the big change was obviously something that's going to be hard. So she clearly was recognized it, even though I think I was doing a reasonably good job of not looking like my entire head was on fire. But so anyway, she was just very supportive, Marty. I can appreciate how your story worked the way it did, because I know that that's her skill of being able to just smooth and calm. So thank you, Wendy. But I think it was nice to hear about your experiences as well.
Thanks, Leanne. That's really nice. And I'm so glad you stuck with it.
Me too.
All right. Beautiful conversation today, Wendy. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Take care.